So it is 11 o'clock on this Friday morning. Welcome everybody. I'm looking here in the virtual room and see it's filling rapidly. So a warm welcome from my side. My name is Michael Wolf. I'm here the partner in the office in Hamburg on this lovely Friday. It's quite hot outside, so thank you very much for your interest and your participation in our webinar. And it is still filling. So, but I think we will go on. So, thank you very much for the participation. What will we do today? We will do this webinar on the topic of product line engineering. This webinar is embedded in a whole series of webinars. At the moment, the interaction with the customer is a little bit difficult due to the whole Corona situation. So we started several weeks ago with webinars coming from our different consultancy topics which we provide there. And this one is embedded in the topic Advanced Systems Engineering. So we have done a lot of webinars so far in this topic. For example, we gave a general introduction in the topic Systems Engineering. We focused on training, what are the different certificates and what are the differences there. We did a webinar about artificial intelligence in the product development. So there is already a lot of stuff, information generated. And if you're interested in all these topics, you can go on our homepage and find the contents there. So let's focus on the topic today. Product line engineering is the headline. And what we will do, we will take a short glimpse on the agenda. And as we can see on the agenda, now we are in the short introduction. I don't want to tell you too much about product line engineering because the first point will be the definition of the methodology and the context of product line engineering. On the second part, we will look the types of reuse, how you use it in your company if you're coming from a handcrafting or more mass production point of view. And the third point will be the integration into your existing environment, engineering design environment. And the focus is more on how to organize and implement the methodology into your organization and yeah, how you can do that. So before we start with the content, I will give you some technical notes. You have on the right side, you have this webinar dashboard software where you can interact with us. There's one area where you can put questions in and you can ask us during the webinars. On the other side, we have also prepared 3 questions in terms of a poll or a survey, which we put in online during the webinar and where we can interact concerning the outcome with you as an audience. And at least I want to highlight that we record this webinar. So afterwards, we will provide you with a link with a video of this webinar, which you can share with your colleague or interested people around you. So before we start with the content, just shortly who we are. So my name is, as I already said, Michael Wolf. I'm here the partner at the office in Hamburg. I'm working now for Unity more than 2 decades, since '99. And my role here is the business development, customer development, especially in the industry sector, and also with a focus on the northern region, Germany, Denmark, and the surrounding. And short fun fact about me, with the Corona lockdown, I had to quit the gym. It's not possible to go there anywhere. And yeah, it's for me really important for my work-life balance. And now I'm amusing my neighbors by doing kettlebell workouts in the evening in our garden. So the second speaker is Sven-Olaf Schulze. He is principal also here in the office in Hamburg. He works for Unity now since 2012, and he has put a lot of work in the whole topic systems engineering. As you might know, I think definitely certain participants will know him from his former role. He was also member of or speaker of the board of the GFSA, and yeah, is working in the surrounding for 2 decades now, and he has an SE Cert Level A certificate. So, and fun fact about him is that he is glad that he has booked such a wide internet bandwidth before the Corona crisis. I can tell you I have 2 kids, and at the moment, if you are not have a stable connection, you really have trouble at home. So I think this was a good approach. So last but not least, we have Hannes Hüffer. He is also a senior consultant here in the office in Hamburg. So we have a lot of Hamburg knowledge here on the table, and he's working for Unity since 2016. And he's also a certified systems engineer, and he brings a lot of industry expertise to the table from various projects across the industry. And fun fact about him is, that during grace to the situation with Corona, he has the possibility under the week to be at home, and he's a young father of a 10-month-old son, so he can spend his spare time together with his family at home. So that briefly about us. I don't want to advertise too much about Unity. I just want to put it into the context. So as you can see here in the middle pillar, who are our customers from different industries, and we are doing there, as I said before, more than 20 years projects in this area from different perspectives, trainings, as well as consultancy. And on the other hand, we are also heavily involved in the scientific network here in Germany. There are different organization and research projects where we are involved. And I want to highlight here the GFSE, which is the Gesellschaft für Systems Engineering, where, as I said, Sven-Olaf has done a lot of work in the last years. And this is the German chapter of the INCOSI here for Germany. Yeah, 20 years experience in the topic systems engineering. So we write also a lot about this. We have on our homepage a section with publications where you can find all this content. We will also provide you at the end with all the links to this topic. And we have there opportunities as well as books and so on. So if you're interested in these topics, you can find it there. So I think this is the short forward. I would like now to hand over to Sven-Olaf to guide us through the first chapter with the definition of the PLE topic.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael, for the introduction. Warm welcome from outside and here to the session. And I want to give you a focus in the next minutes more on the context, and give you a short introduction to the context, while my colleague Hannes Hüffer will then take over to make some definitions before we go into the deep dive of product line engineering. On the next slide, we have prepared some questions at the beginning and wanted to know a little bit more about how familiar you are with product line engineering. So it's an opportunity to select one out of these 4 possible answers, and you can interact with us a little bit. And I see a lot of people are active. So have you some experience? So then it's extremely familiar. And if you're working in a PLE environment, down to not familiar. So let's wait and see some seconds and make some self-assessment from the audience to see what audience we have today online. Yeah, still some votes are coming in.
Yeah, we're at 80%. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see the result. Oh, so moderate familiar. So we are more or less not beginners. We are in the average of slightly familiar and moderate familiar, and we have also some senior experts here, which means we hope that we can capture all of you a little bit. So to give you a short introduction to this webinar. Thanks a lot for your vote. And on the next questions, we wanted to know a little bit more about to what extent you use product line engineering. And so as we have moderate and experts here, so is it really applicable in your company? Not at all. Softwares, or do you use it for software systems, or do you use it for software and electronics, or is it quite established in the so-called our systems engineering environment, where we are talking about from like car or washing machines down to component or software level? So again, make your selection and your choice 1 out of 4. And still, we are again up to 68-70% of votes participation. Michael, you are the master of the poll.
So 71% voted.
Yeah. So okay, so I'm glad to see that we are talking about the right system application, not only on software focus. So that is also one aim or one goal of our webinar, to show how to implement product line engineering in a more system world, not only focus on software only. So which means we want to give you a short introduction about these system view and application of product line engineering in a system context. Thanks a lot for your participation. Therefore, let's focus on a little bit our starting point, which is on the next slide. If you remember the mass production, because I think this is where we are currently living in, and we start with our old-fashioned and familiar Ford statement, that starting mass production at that time was so you can use every color you want, as long as it is black. So which means the key starting point of mass production was at the end not very flexible. It was really flexible in getting products manufactured and produced, but not with a big variance and variety. So it was more as one standard product. And the question is now, if we are going now to our nowadays, 111 years later, the challenge here is to be more flexible, to focus on the market, on the customer. So following the trends is the key message here. So which means looking to the trends of digitalization, connectivity, of connected houses, connected cars, or the trends of urbanization and the requirements coming in. We are talking about sustainability and other dynamics up to platforms. These are the trends which are influencing us, and as an engineer or developer or a company, so which means starting from the company strategy, it's important to identify your trends, your requirements, to get more individualization and more variability to satisfy the customer need. And therefore, this variability is the key for the future. And this has to be recognized also from the engineers and from the organization. So therefore, we ask this on the next slide, I want to give you a short introduction to our first webinar, which was mentioned by Michael at the beginning. We established a picture, a big picture of where to find product line engineering. And if you're looking to the life cycle approach, you can see that our product line or model-based product line engineering, we focus more on the foresight, innovation, and system development. These are the areas where we want to drive a little bit more in the next minutes and to focus more. So which means this based on this picture, and you can see our approach and also the surroundings of digital twin, PLM, agile development, and other methodologies and approaches and prerequisites you have to consider if you want to do product line engineering. This is also, you can see or download this on our opportunity or also from the webinar later on. If we go to the next slide, we made also a poll during the initial session of this digitalization of product development, and we asked what are the enablers of your priority, or what are the enablers of the future for your company. And it was, for me at least, a big surprise at this stage that PLE was so popular. So 45% of the audience, and we had around close to 100 participants in this webinar, voted that for the company, its PLE is 45% is the most important enabler for the future. So therefore, we are happy to have you here, and based on this feedback and activity and introduction of strategic trends and so on, I want to hand over to my colleague Hannes Hüffer, who will give you a short introduction and definition what we understand or how we define PLE and what is the definition. Hannes?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sven-Olaf. Before I start with a deep dive into the product line engineering, I just want to get us on the same page and the same understanding, because there are some terms in this context that are mostly used as a synonym and might be cause of some confusion. So starting maybe with some basic terms so that we understand each other. The one point is that we want to highlight the difference here, that, for example, product engineering back in the days was mainly used for a single development of a product. So you always had a specific project team that was developing a product, and there was no reuse of any component except maybe your knowledge management in the organization, or perhaps the increased experience of the engineers. Later on, and this is quite famous in Germany, for the product platform engineering, organizations discovered that most products share a certain set of development artifacts that are, for example, components, documents, analysis, like test cases, safety analysis, etc. And they build a platform to identify all the components that are shared for all the different products and that they have in common. And this is highlighted here with a blue area. So the product line engineering now enriches that blue area by also covering the same basis for different variants that might only be shared by two variants, but not only by all products. And to do that, you always require the same basis. And that's what really product line engineering builds on, that you split your development activities into two parts. And the first part is a so-called domain engineering, which can also be called the generic system development, that builds the basis that you have for your product line by applying certain set of different processes, such as architecture definition, design, requirements management, etc., to identify what are the common functions, what are common requirements that all the different products that you are going to produce for different markets that are differentiated by the region, by pricing, by functionality, or anything different like a different brand. What do they have in common, and how do we design that product line to increase the reuse ratio? That's one part, the domain engineering, that is a lot of front-loading work to be done. And the second part is application engineering, or as we call it, the specific system development, that aims to utilize most of the predefined and pre-designed components, documents, and build market-ready products that can be shipped to your customer. So that really is the key point. If you want to build and develop a basis and want to apply product line engineering, you have to split your development activities into two parts. Otherwise, you will not achieve generic basis. And the time that we see that industrial practices has different types of reuse approaches that can be used as product line engineering. And those I would like to present you a bit further, because they build on each other. And for us, they are more like evolutionary stages. And that's why we also gave them names in reference to the different industrial revolutions, as Michael was saying before, that we come from a handcrafting stage where every product is uniquely designed and produced for a customer. We go over to a mass production where we use standardized components, and we come to the individualization stage with the Industry 4.0, where we use newest technology to combine standard components, but allow certain flexibility by applying software parameters or different components that are suited for the specific customer. And all of these three stages have different stereotypical characteristics. And I will explain all of those stages and give you an idea how they are embedded into the organization. So starting with the handcrafting, and the technical term for that is also the opportunistic product line engineering. And the opportunistic reuse identifies each system development as an isolated problem and singular solution. This is mostly common in many organizations that we see. And I want to explain that by giving an example. Imagine your organization is responsible for developing a steering wheel. And so as good engineers, you do that in a project team with a certain specification, and you design your steering wheel with that specification, and you include the functionality. And after finishing your work on that system A, he will potentially receive another order, and you will have another project team that has to develop a system B, which is also a steering wheel, what, for example, with a hands-free calling. I think that function is quite common to all of us. And so opportunistic product line engineering takes your system A as a basis. You will look at the specification and you compare both specifications with one another and come up with the deviations in terms of architecture, requirements, functions. And for example, you might be able to carry over some parts such as the honking system or anything else. And then you will specifically design your system B. In parallel, you could also imagine maybe there's another project where you have to include your volume control. And you basically do the same. You perform an impact analysis, you figure out what parts can be taken over, and then you specifically design your steering wheel based on that specification. And you could continue endlessly, because whenever you have certain new specification, then you will design your new product. And that is what normal practice is when you have your evolutionary development. But you can also see that the reuse is more an exception, and it's not a rule that it's systematically planned in advance. But for what it's worth, you potentially have 4 different sets of steering wheels developed, and potentially they are not interchangeable and not integratable into different sets of vehicles. So really, opportunistic reuse is grabbing that opportunity, but not doing it systematically. And as you might imagine here, your organization will solely focus on the application engineering, because you take previous results and do a specific solution which is very product centered. And to do that, you actually need to have some sort of product data management system so that you can take some data into your project and use that for your new development. And you need to have some basic systems engineering competence to actually perform your impact analysis, that you can analyze your requirements, your functions, and the architecture, for example. but the result is always an individual product. And in the next stage for the mass production, this is a lot of different because you use already the integrated product line engineering, and the integrated reuse here utilizes your initial management of a generic product and variants that you came up with before in terms of a front loading activity. And in that example, we chose a laundry machine and a dryer. And you defined your product line differentiating your laundry machine by region, by functionality, by brand, by pricing, or other target group. And you came up with the common parts, and you came up with the variation points and what are the combinatorics of your product line that are actually combining your whole laundry machine and dryer. So that is something that you do in advance. And then imagine your sales organization has an idea of a new specific feature. For example, the Wi-Fi connectivity, because sales identified some use cases that it's comfortable for the customer to identify and to perform monitoring for the laundry machine from the sofa so that they know when it will be finished. Or maybe another use case that the dryer can already preheat if the laundry machine is almost ready. So you are asked to include that specific feature into your product and make a very specific system. So you instantiate your product line, include your feature in there by also performing an impact analysis, identifying what parts can be carried over, and then you design your system D as a very specific solution. And then you can ship it, you can sell it to your target group. Afterwards, you will have to make a decision as an organization because potentially you identify that Wi-Fi connectivity module has such sufficient reuse potential that you might want to integrate that into your product line. But of course, you do that with a trade-off analysis because you don't want to make your product line very complex because then your management overhead costs are also increasing to manage your product line. So you have to decide either is that specific feature still a feature only for that one target group, maybe that one customer, or is it for bigger purpose you want to integrate it into other brands, into other laundry machines as well. And what you might notice here is that I highlighted that we have some work to be done before. And so this hybrid product line centered organization will focus now on the presented different two parts of PLE. You have one product line project team that will do some upfront work and come up with the basis. And then you have quite a big part still with your specific system development project team that is finishing the work. They are designing and developing market-ready products, but you still have identified what they have all in common. And to do that in the organization, you now need additional know-how. You need to have some more expert know-how for configuration management, for variability management, because you want to know what parts can be configured together. And so you need to have some more system engineering competence to actually deliver your product line and the respective variants. If you take that even further, you might to differentiate your product even further, because in a globalized world, as Sven-Olaf was saying, we get more and more differentiated target groups. And so the bigger your individualization approach is and the bigger you differentiate your product, the bigger the number of variants become, and the more likely it is for you to aim for the anticipated product line engineering. And that one is also our holy grail of product line engineering, where your development artifacts as your test cases, your budgets, your components, your drawings, your analysis, etc. Everything that you do in your work is stored in your database, basically. And they are logically combined, and you can notice what your specific feature that you develop, to what component, to what document this is linked. And so this database not only covers the newly developed feature, but also every single developed system. And it also includes the huge combinatorics that you can analyze, and that you know whenever a customer is selecting certain sets of features, what the potential product is. And this gives you the flexibility of individualizing your system. And for that, the product line centered organization has a much bigger share of your development activities, because your goal is to continuously develop feature, release it into the market, and give some value to the customer. And to stress that a bit further, I want to use a second quote of Henry Ford, who was saying that if he was asking people what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses instead of a car. And that's what the name anticipated product line engineering is really about. You anticipate what the customer wants and how they want to use the product, and you create that demand. And so you develop those features and release it into the market. You increase your variability by smart data management and smart development with the use of featured teams. And so as you can see, you have the bigger part of the product line project team and the smaller part of the specific system development team, because naturally you will have some work to do to achieve a proof of compliance, to get the certifications, the homologations, and that will be done by a specific system development team that is more focused on the integration and verification part. And as I mentioned, the speed is key, your time to market is key. So you will need to have an advanced IT system, which we call systems product lifecycle management, because you need to have some data about your ecosystem. You need to have some validated system context to do early verification and validations. You need to know at an early stage of your development if you can actually perform your feature and if that brings really value. And for that, you also need some more advanced system engineering competence. As you might notice, consistency of data is very important. So you want to have your model-based systems engineering in place, and you need to have your adaptability of your system. So that's why an agile system engineering approach is important, to have a flexible architecture, to have very smart modules that you can interchange, so that you have a good basis for your different features that are to be developed. But as I mentioned before, this stage is more like a holy grail, and it is important if you realize you want to achieve that, you realize individualization is very important for your system, then it is known or important to define your roadmap and you integrate that PLE approach into your organization. And that is something that my colleague Sven-Olaf will cover within the next chapter.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hannes. I will take over now a little bit, focus on the integration and the roadmap, as mentioned by Hannes. And at the beginning, we were focusing, or the starting point was mass production, variety, and the, let's say, different levels of applying no or less product line engineering up to the holy grail. these 3 steps. And in the next slide, I want to give you a short map, or on the next slide, I want to give you a short introduction about the maturity level. We analyzed our projects we have done so far, and let's say try to cluster and give you some helping hand what maturity levels you can apply into your organization. So this is more a helping hand where you can and your company should decide what is the right level of product line engineering in the future, and what is the target, and maybe also the steps how to come to a fully deployed product line engineering in a mechatronic world. So therefore, we call it the opportunistic, integrated and anticipated level, or comprehend and apply and master level. So, and why do we choose this 3 steps? If you look to the domain level, it's more product centered, which means it's still where from historical point of view, a lot of industries and companies are coming from. And you see in the domain level the focus on software engineering, because if we go now to the history of product line engineering, this was established in the 1970s about reuse of software, and more a structured way on reuse and opportunistic reuse of software coding, software development in that way. So here we are talking now sometimes about product line engineering 2.0. With respect to mechatronic systems. So therefore, from our point of view, the software area is a first step where you can apply product line engineering in thinking and methodology in your organization. And you have to then synchronize this with your mechanical product development lifecycle and so on. So the basis to do that and synchronize these product line engineering approach from software domain with the rest, electric, electronic, and also mechatronic or mechanical, the basis is here again a well-established systems engineering basis and competence, specifically on the requirements management and on the architecture definition. To do this and to have a traceability and to have the synchronization points, you further need also a very good IT infrastructure, at least, to synchronize the development phase in a classical product development process with a good PDM system where the data is available and you are really sure that your software is in sync with the mechanical solution and also electrical solution. So here it's sufficient to have a project organization established. So we are talking about the matrix organization, applying systems engineering, PDM environment, and also a project organization. If you want to apply to the next level to come to a target of a fully deployed product line engineering in a system context, we offer you an integrated solution and extend the software view with the electronic view. So to synchronize the development here with the electric part and the software part, which means, again, the basis here is systems engineering, and one of the pillars and fundamental which has to be deployed and implemented prior to start with this approach is systems engineering. So also here, the processes of mission analysis, stakeholder requirements are again valid, are the architecture definition, and you have to have at least a very good configuration management to have a good control on the variability and to have a good overview and traceability. So with respect to the IT environment, you have to consider now the product lifecycle, because it's important that you can configure different versions and variances with electric and software also in the production and in the operational phase. So it's mandatory that also your IT infrastructure is well prepared to support this and to be efficient and productive also in this area of applying product line engineering for electric and software. And here we at least recommend to follow a minimum hybrid project and product line organization, as mentioned by my colleague Hannes, so that you have these application and also domain specific organization. So here, looking to the processes, you need different processes to be developed, and also a kind of interaction between these different life cycles. If you want to come to a maturity level of the highest level of product line engineering in the digitalizational world and connected world, so which means also integrate mechanical things, then we are facing new challenges. As you can imagine, in several industries, the mechanical procurement of some parts takes longer than, let's say, these anticipated and feature-oriented agile way of working. So there are some additional prerequisites and challenges to be accepted and to be implemented to a really mechatronic PLE approach. So here, a prerequisite is really, again, the systems engineering activities, and also a model-based approach, and so which really means a front-loading and a hybrid process world to really be established in your organization, which means you also have to have then a validated system PLM surrounding with a single point of truth of data and a seamless integration to be sure that your virtual environment and your physical and your operational environment is seamless integrated and you have full control on the traceability flow. So it's up to you to decide which are the right, let's say, goal. Is it more applying PLE, or do you want to establish a fully PLE established smart mechatronic world? Then these are the different levels of maturity or the steps towards that. On the next slide, we are focusing more on the integration of PLE. So if you have decided on your maturity level, you can imagine now that you, for example, need a dedicated feature teams, as mentioned by my colleague Hannes. So it's an imbalance, or your development currently, if it's oriented on project management and development phases, if you're coming more to feature development, and what Steve Jobs said, if the customer knows what he can do with a cell phone, then he will never ask for. It's also what Mr. Ford said, everyone would ask for a horse, not for a car. So therefore, it's now this feature approach of this front-loading virtual verification, virtual environment development, including mechanical approach. So you need a feature teams, a different way of processes, and still you need a development or integration process. And it's owned by these feature-oriented teams to develop, let's say, these features, and they are owning and cloning, and the application is done on the application team. But nevertheless, you need this new process. You need a budget for each of these development processes. And for example, a prerequisite is also a system reference architecture. To develop features means everyone is focusing and referring to a common view, company view on how do you structure, what is your architectural view. Otherwise, you will have a big problem to verify, validate, and implement, let's say, your features, and it's not gaining any benefit. Coming to that, it's also then the reference architecture, and as I mentioned, the virtual approach of enabling thinking in a model-based approach to really make a collaborative view of feature implementation, early validation, and front loading. And as I mentioned here, the configuration management comes into the high priority view to be able to really configure and control your feature with your reference architecture to enable different solutions, individualization, and let's say be fast, and to release every 6 months or every 2 months a new version of your product to your market, CE conform, or let's say safety conform, all these done then by the application team. So, and to support this, the IT infrastructure is a key enabler to support the process, the team, and so on. What does it mean for the industries? And to come to a conclusion, it's very important on the next slide that, as you can see, that regardless of the industry, you can imagine that the industry and the mentioned trends are focusing on this variability and customization. So as mentioned before, the Internet of Things, the connected world of connected houses, connected cities are now to be covered in our approach. And we need to manage these feature development of making money and new business cases on making money with the cloud service instead of the product as it was before. So therefore, it's important to apply then also agile approach, because otherwise you cannot follow the speed and the request from the market. So the third level of PLE approach, the master of system or the master of product line engineering, is here the key challenge, but it can be managed. So therefore, from our point of view, it's very important to first decide on which stepwise approach you want to achieve your roadmap and what is your target. Is it the second goal, the hybrid solution, or is it a fully mechatronical PLE feature-oriented work? And if you had decided on this maturity level, then you have to decide where to apply, for example, agile systems engineering, where to apply model-based systems engineering. If you want to stick on the second level on electronic and software, it might be only necessary to have agile approach on a pure agile approach on software and electronic, and also in this environment, and to use model-based systems engineering then to integrate this into a mechanical view and make an early validation of your model. So depending on the product portfolio, then this is the second step. And having the, let's say, agreed the goal and where to apply which methodology and methods and processes, then you can just start to implement your goal of product line engineering with respect to a kind of roadmap, what we call roadmap, in different steps. And it's under control, including challenging and changing the organization from a more product-oriented product development phase to a feature-oriented front-loading agile organization. So these are the requirements and the roadmap we wanted to show you, which means, again, the systems engineering is the basis, the system reference architecture are the basis. It's coming more and more an agile approach of fast, feature-oriented development, and a small project world to enable and integrate it and make it release and satisfy safety or regulatory requirements as a basis. So coming to that, we wanted to, let's say, come to a conclusion with a last poll on the next slide. And therefore, the question here is now to you. What do you think? Is this fully holy grail product line engineering in a smart mechatronic world? Is this can this be reached? Is it a goal for a development perspective? Yes or no? Or do you think that this is pure futuristic and not achievable? Or is there an, let's say, other obstacle, which means first the organization has to understand that there is a dramatic change and front loading from product development to a feature-oriented clone and owned organization. Still, the votes are starting and increasing fast. Michael, you are the master of the vote. You can.
Yeah, we are
see
around 70%, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share the results? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So It's interesting to see, and I'm happy that you have voted yes, because I think it's really a challenge and maybe sometimes a long way for different industries. But yeah, the 42% of the participants or voted participants said yes. And I'm glad to read that it's also a prerequisite for having this transition started, that the organization has to recognize the different processes and methods. And therefore, we want to stop here the discussion and open the question from your side based on this impulse and let's say question of achievable goal. Do you have questions still open, or we might also discuss the challenge of transition and the way ahead, or how to achieve this PLE goal in your organization?
We already had 2 questions during the presentation. I think the first one will go back to slide, I think it was number 13. It was the overview. And the question comes from Hans-Peter Jepsen, and he asks, how will you place clone and own development in this picture? And I think it was the part of Sven-Olaf. Therefore, I think it's clever that you might give the answer.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. It's a very good question. Thanks a lot, Jan-Peter. And we try to show this by the picture of the transition that you need, not only the application engineering, that you also need the transformation to the front loading. So from my point of view, clone and own will be, or it will be owned, the features will be owned in these feature teams, because the application team will take it from the box and apply a configurator and, let's say, satisfy this on the product itself, which should be sold or developed and configured. So for me, clone and own is mandatory to be owned, or let's say applied in these feature team organization at the beginning, because they have the full overview of variances, past and also future needs and new ideas. Okay, maybe so Hannes, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, well, I believe that the most classic known clone and own development approach that we see is mostly located into the opportunistic product line engineering, where you have an evolutionary approach, and you take your development results of your previous project from the last product generation, and then you analyze what needs to be changed. That's also quite common approach in the automotive industry. And so I believe that the clone and own development is more focused on the opportunistic reuse. It's not purely systematically upfront work that was done, but more, as you mentioned, and as the name is saying, you clone your development results and you own it for the next version.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. There was now a request from Hans-Peter. I somehow disagree with you. Your maturity levels, if the companies where I have been product familiar thinking start in mechatronics and EE, while software development is product centered.
This might be right. We wanted to show you more a systematic way how to implement in different steps product line engineering into your organization, and there for sure will be a mixture. So therefore, Hans-Peter, I agree, but it's a guidance how we, when we analyzed our project and coming from the software development, what we propose. That for an individual company, there might be a gray activity for their roadmap to be established. And the mechanical part is the question here is due to the history, as we are coming from mechanical views, that's what we know. But the real PLE approach is more software oriented, and also to have features developed in a short time, and it's not so easy for mechanical parts. And also, if you go to the connected world and the new requirements of individualization and where the strategy of companies goes, I'm also a mechanical engineer, so therefore it's maybe very provocative, but for me the mechanical solution is a very stable design, and the features in a really PLE oriented world will be more on these cloud and connected services, which means it's more dealing with software and electric environment, and the mechanical part will be more or less some stable thing. But for the integration point of view, it's very important to consider the mechanical part, because if a sensor has not the right position in the mechanical world, you can measure everything, but it will not work. And that is also what we recognize in some application of our customers. The interaction is very important, but the mechanical part will be in future a very stable and reliable backbone, but the feature orientation will be more on electric and software variances, and to apply this. And that's what we recognize in several years, that we are coming from a mechanical solution to a mechatronic solution. And therefore, this is where PLE and our maturity level are very important.
Okay, so thank you. As your host, I have also a very close look on the watch. So one final question, which comes from Gerhard Biermann. It's a rather technical question. Which companies are providing systems PLM? I think this was in the part of Hannes. Maybe Hannes can start to answer the question.
Yeah, I gladly start. So the systems PLM is more like a bigger engineering IT system, which consists of many different IT systems, basically, because what you will need to have is, to one side, you need to have your interfaces to your ecosystem, so that you need to know what are the other systems that interact with my product, with my system, and what is their data, what is the version, and how do they work together. And you need to have standardized interfaces to that and to other organizations. So systems PLM is more like a bigger engineering environment that you need to consider. So there's no one provider of IT systems.
Yeah. From my point of view, we have the big companies, as we are supporting our customers more on the PLM solution. We are looking for their requirements, and if you're more on bigger, large companies, then they intend to have one more or less single source, but it's really depending on your IT infrastructure and your levels and layers and interaction of your architecture of the IT system. But at the end, if you look to key providers like PTC, IBM, and so on, and Dassault Systems, and so on, they are offering a set of, and they are developing now a PLM system, IT infrastructure. But for small, medium enterprises, there are also other companies we know which uses different features of these enterprises, and also from small, medium enterprises, for example, contact software, or there are other IT providers which, let's say, try to satisfy the need of your environment. So therefore, the IT PLM system has to really be good analyzed, and a good IT infrastructure has to fit into the processes and the need of the development and the production, and that you have really a seamless flow of data and a single point of truth. Yeah.
So we are coming hardly to the end of the webinar. I can see that attendees are going out of the session, so there's still some questions left. I would propose that we come back to you when we provide you the information about the webinar and the contents, and that we happily discuss this with you separate, because with a look on the watch, I would like to close now the webinar. So from my point of view, the final conclusion is, what are the main 3 takeaways from this session today? what have we seen? So on the one side, we have seen what is the status quo in the different companies, and especially also from the audience. And on the second step, we have seen how should I use, or how can I use this methodology? And the third takeaway is how can I involve the organization, and how could I adapt it to my organization? So I hope the webinar was interesting for you. I see the question, I think it is. So thank you very much. Thank you, the speakers, for your content and your time. Thank you, the audience, on such a lovely and hot day that you had the time to participate here with us. And on the next slide, I can show you, we will provide you afterwards with the white paper, so there's something written you can read afterwards, and also with the link to the webinar as a video, so you can share that with your colleagues. And I would also take the outlook to the coming webinars. There are two, one more focusing on the whole topic PLM business case, it's on the 18th August, and one coping with the whole topic digital twin, how the digital twin will change our future. It's in September. So if you're interested in this, we will provide this via mail and social media, and then you have the chance to get on these webinars. So on the last slides, there are also our contact details. As I said before, we will happily discuss with you every question you have. Give us a call, don't hesitate to speak with us. Yeah, I would like to thank you for the participation, and I will wish you a nice rest Friday and a nice weekend. And yeah, during times like this,